So this is going to be a good one. Let's get to the board, take to the pitch, and see what's going to happen. Wellington is starting this game, and we're going to get this underway. Good warm-up handshake to show some sportsmanship. We'd love to see that. And it's off to Wellington to draw his tiles.
Yeah, I'm not sure what, maybe you could do like the ceremonial exchange of racks instead of flags or jerseys. Although I imagine our producers might be a little bit upset about those racks getting moved around too much.
I think they're taped down, so fortunately that won't be an issue. But we've got Wellington drawing his tiles. He pulled a few letters out here that he can use to get some points. He's not hesitating at all. He's going to put his play down so fast. I think we know what it is. FRIG coming down to clean up his rack. Can you explain that play a little bit for the audience, why Wellington did that so instantly?
Yeah, I mean, as you duplicate tiles, you've got 2 I's, 2 R's. That kind of cuts down on just the ways that your tiles can be arranged and the way that you can use them to make words. And your immediate instinct is always going to be to unduplicate those letters, especially those I's, because they're not friends when you have more than one on your rack. So yeah, just you looking at that rack, you just immediately start to generate, get rid of an R, get rid of an I. Oh, hey, frig, this works. Oh, hey, that takes an S. I have an S. Let me set it up here, play it here, play defensively, not to give extra points with that I, and let's just go.
Yeah, for the uninitiated, you might think, okay, hey, wait, if you can just put an S on that and make a 5-letter word, wouldn't you score a lot more points? Yeah, that would be 26 points versus 16. But the S, keeping it, keeps strong bingo tiles, and that has a transformative impact on his rack, increasing the likelihood that he's going to be able to bingo. He has actually drawn an H and a T, so he'll bingo with this rack, but he could also have made an extension of frig to fright, or other versions of that. So that's kind of interesting. But it looks like his initial automatic play of frig there is going to pay off for him. Meanwhile, Thomas has a tough decision. I'm seeing a couple options, but not too much. What do you think he's going to do here?
Yeah, this is another one again. You don't have as many options to generate here because you have so many of the same letters. 3 A's and 2 I's, that's never going to give you a whole lot of options here. You can see that Thomas is considering Naiad, leaving AI just to get out of some of these duplicate letters as best he can. With the Collins lexicon, he also has the option to play AIA, but it looks like, do we have a bit of a rack? I see Naiad on the board and I see Naiad on the rack.
Need to refresh the rack a little bit there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's coming down with Naiad. He's come down with Naiad, and Wellington hasn't taken too much time to put down his bingo of hitters. So this is going to be a fierce battle now. It depends now, what does Thomas draw instead?
Look at that
blank. So
we've got fireworks.
Wellington is not going to be able to run away here.
Yeah, this is the type of game we want. This kind of comes back just real quick on revisiting what you were describing on that first play of frig versus frigs. It's like you said, you can score an extra 12 points, is it? Roughly that, by adding the S on that first play. But look at how much more Wellington scored by leaving the S on his rack. He now drew favorably, got a bingo down, scored a bunch of points. And that IR leave without the S looks a lot more challenging than IRS. So this is kind of where a lot of players do end up playing relatively short instead of immediately burning their points or their firepower, in this case, the S, for an extra 10 points or so, just banking on that return on investment being much stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this case, the S pluralizing frig made up that same difference. So really, even without that bingo, the ability to just use the S in a plural is so much more valuable than taking an extra 10 points in that first instance. So good standard choice by Wellington there, but he does get that to pay off. And now it's back to Thomas, who has some great letters, but he does not have a playable bingo. So what do you think he's going to be thinking about? What are some options for him to weigh through?
Yeah, in this case, you're going to want to get some points. You don't want to just drop the J for 9 points with JA, of course. And you have some opportunities on this board. You have some options where you can score a decent amount with the J while retaining the blank. And the fact that you're able to retain the blank here makes you really start to think about more aggressive options. Something like Haji from the H allows you to get rid of that J, leave a really favorable NT blank leave, and potentially, as Wellington just did with Frigg, scoring points for Friggs when it was pluralized. Thomas would be in position to potentially pluralize Haji for an extra boost to his next score if he can hit a bingo or draw an S that lets him come down.
Yeah, Haji is the word meaning somebody who's completed the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca, and it's would score 32 points. So it's definitely a clear front runner over some of the other plays. A lot of interesting J words do originate in the Middle East and the Arab world, and he's considering another one of those words with jinn, which of course has a lot of variant spellings as well, and he's considering that. It looks like he's lining that up instead. So that's a few point sacrifice, but it is a little bit more defensive. It's not opening that top right triple. Instead, it's going to create a little bit of options for bingoing without an S. So that's a very interesting approach. It also might have something to do with the fact that he has an A. So he might be able to use the J if he ends up drawing some direct and needing to unload letters, and he is getting some direct. So that's a little unfortunate, but very interesting choice by Thomas to play Jin instead of Haji. What do you think of that comparison straight up?
Yeah, I think in this case, the difference between the two plays that Thomas elected to focus on was the fact that AT blank is a bit closer to an actual bingo than NT blank. NT blank does require drawing some vowels, whereas AT blank already has that balance. So there are already hooks on the board. Hitters takes a front S in Scrabble, which has already been called out in the chat. So with that in mind, perhaps Thomas, rather than creating S hooks that he can't, like having a second S hook is an interesting kind of strategical position where you're looking to really hit one of them as soon as possible. But in the case of the board shape now, if he were to hit a bingo ending in S, then suddenly there are no S hooks readily available for a 7 to end in that S. So rather than really throw the barn doors open and have a race, it looks like Thomas just didn't want to quite have it be that uncontrollable of a board.
Yeah. And although Jin was a bit safer overall, I think, than Haji in terms of what it creates, Wellington was, holding a K for a big K score, and he makes a play that I think was mostly straightforward for him with Filk, because it's keeping MBOE, which has some synergy with each other, and at the same time scoring a boatload of points, 43 points for Filk. So that comes down fairly quickly. And it's back to Thomas to deal with bad tiles.
Yeah, he drew the Q and a couple more A's to go along with his AT blank leave. He's pretty quickly here settled on Cot for 22, shedding that Q and one of the A's to really try to get back to his bingo chances as quickly as he can. Which kind of took away the opportunity for us to have a bit more of a discussion about whether he should consider burning that blank. With the I in hitters there next to a double letter score, he could have scored about 30 more points with a couple of options like Qua or Aqua.
Yeah. Aqua and Quay and Qua, all high-scoring plays, burning the blank. Now, traditionally, you might get told if you go to a Scrabble club, don't waste your blank if you're not getting a bingo. But it's actually really about the net difference between your top play with the blanks and your top play without the blank. And when you actually compare them, you say, hey, wait, I could gain 25, 30 more points by burning my blank. Then it's kind of really the same thing as being able to play a bingo. So So the impressive thing here is that he made the decision quickly and moved on from there. On the other hand, it was definitely something he could have considered. And now Wellington has actually benefited from the fact that Aqua didn't come down because it didn't ruin his spot for Mbao. So I wonder if that's a play that'll be thought about later. But for sure, it was a very interesting choice.
Yeah, we see here that Thomas is taking the walk up to the computer challenge just to confirm the validity of this Witter's hook. It's one of those words that you could pretty easily consider it valid in common parlance, but is it in the Scrabble dictionary? In this case, it is. It's not always the case. There's a bit of an interesting choice there for Wellington as well. He could have scored a few more points by playing Endgame there, getting an M on the double letter score. I think it was 11 more points roughly. But that also sets up extensions to the triple, as in Endwomb, is a verb.
Yeah, I do think for Wellington, who's a tremendous player, that might be considered a little bit of a miss because of the fact that although Enwoom does come with that slight risk of the extension at the end, Mbao also comes with the risk of maybe a big X play coming back. So I think taking the additional 12 points for Enwoom would have definitely been worthwhile. But nevertheless, he got the 5 points for the challenge as well. So you might say, hey, if this play might have actually worked out better in any case.
Yeah, although in this case, with the W hook in front of hitters being what was challenged, that +5 might have come either way. But I imagine part of Wellington's consideration there is also the fact that if you are a strong Scrabble player and you're playing someone who, although a strong player themselves, you might view that you have a bit of an advantage in your, whether it's strategy or your word knowledge or just whatever it is, looking at the ratings here, even with Wellington's rating being as stratospheric as it is, generally speaking, as a stronger player, or if you view yourself to be the stronger player, you tend to try to minimize some of those really easy plays for your opponent to score 40, 50, 60 points simply by dropping an ED in this case. Mbao, as you can see, is still relatively volatile with that triple letter word or triple letter double word setup there. But it's not quite as universally threatening.
Right. And now, after unloading cut, he was able to draw some good tiles, and Thomas is able to play Cyanate. Great find from him. He also had the option of playing Analyte, though Analyte would have plunked to the A right underneath the triple word score, which would have super dangerous and probably would have been answered with a very strong, harsh play as well, perhaps like something like Zany. So good choice by Thomas and good find with Cyanate to bring him right back into the game.
Yeah, you can see here that Wellington has set up his tiles in such a way as to play through that C that Thomas just played with Cyanate. Really nice kind of way to clear some letters out, but I wonder if Wellington is just not quite getting around to looking at the rest of the board here, because there is a lot of scoring available. And of course, as I say that, he proves me completely wrong. I should never have wondered in the first place. Zinke with Za both ways is a massive, massive score.
Yeah, that's going to hurt, because whenever you see your opponent with the Z and know that there's potential for them to score more easily, but to be able to hit you with a 79-point play, that's painful, and it also unloads a lot of other heavy consonants and brings Wellington into a position to maybe even pull more common letters and bingo again. So that is really harsh for Thomas to have to eat that right after bingoing. Meanwhile, had he drawn a little differently, he might have had his own play through that C and the triple line. But unfortunately, he does not have that, and he's going to have to struggle through a vowel heavy rack.
Yeah, we're coming again on that bit of a butterfly effect that I was talking about in our first game of the afternoon session, where if Thomas had elected to burn his blank for Aqua or Quay, as was available to him, this entire situation, at least with Zinky, doesn't happen. Mbao most likely comes down, but well, actually, it doesn't, because if he had selected Aqua versus Quay, which of course both of them are defensible plays, he would have had to make a decision between the two. But if he had chosen Aqua, that butterfly's wings would have been very impactful right now.
Yeah. The what if scenarios of some earlier plays will definitely be a factor in this game. But right now, he has to look at how he can unload some of those vowels. He's looking at coop. He's kind of laying that down. He's got a couple options to even add a sixth letter or a fifth tile to play coupé or cooped. Those are something to consider. But now he's pulled the tiles back. He's got to give some other thought. There is the option of playing Evoi, EUOI, hooking on Jin to make Ginny, which would be kind of throwing caution to the wind and saying, hey, let's open up the triple line. Let me find a way to kind of make this board even more volatile and see if I can catch up that way. But I don't expect he'll go quite that far. And he is choosing Coop in the end and pressing his time.
Yeah, I really like this play from Thomas's perspective, because he's down by a very significant margin and he wants to bingo as soon as possible. But he has to shed some vowels here. And as it turns out, DEI, it's vowel heavy, but it has definite bingo potential depending on what comes out of the bag. But he's also setting up his D here. Cood is a word that he can hook his D onto and then come across the triple letter or the triple word score, so that even if he doesn't hit his bingo immediately, he has the ability to potentially get a 40-point play and try to start chipping away at this deficit.
Yeah, it very much is about chipping away. He's, in quite a deficit right now. It's over 100 points, and Wellington's on turn to score more. So, there's the ability to kind of keep within range, then also at the same time get work toward hitting a bingo before Wellington does. And that will be challenging. But right now, Wellington doesn't have a bingo on his rack, and he'll have quite a few number of choices to pick from. The C line in the triple word line in the left side, where cyanate is, certainly presents him with some options. What kind of options does he have, Rob?
Yeah, he has the ability to get through a bunch of these vowels and maximize the value of his P here. He has a few options here: copulae or copular or even copolar, leaving either an R or an E on his rack seem like really strong options, and they take away kind of the worst disaster scenarios of Thomas coming down through that C with a triple. He also has some really interesting plays as well he could fit, depending on whether he's feeling a little risk friendly or risk averse. There's a really, really nice play here, hooking between multiple words on this board for almost, or actually it is the same score.
Yeah, it looks like Wellington is considering Coppola right now, and that scores 33 points. Some of those alternatives, as you mentioned, are also in the same territory, around 33 points. So he's comparing and kind of looking to say, well, what does he actually want to hold on to? But it doesn't seem like there's really that much doubt that he'll play there. As far as what else is possible, I think it's really interesting that he could consider a play like Roop. If he considers that Coop might be a setup, he could play ROUP forming Cooper and also keep a nice lead that way. It'd be a very minor point sacrifice because it's also a big score, but it creates a different sort of shape to the board. At this point, with a lead over 100 points, do you focus more on shutting down a triple lane, or do you focus more on creating the most optimal lead for yourself? What do you think, Rob?
I think in a position like this, my instinct is generally to keep trying to put some scoring pressure on. You don't want to be incognizant of the really heavy risks of a triple triple coming down for 100+ points. But if you can keep scoring 30 points or so each turn, even while eliminating some of those threats of like the triple triple in this case, you're generally willing to accept, a 10 or a 20 point trade-off here if your opponent scores really well with something they've just opened. Um, the other thing here too that is probably part of Wellington's consideration here is he has a 2 bingo lead. He wants to hasten the end of the game, so he doesn't want to play 2 or 3 tile plays that are available, like that little cute little fit of areola there that would have put the O next to the J. He wants to accelerate to the end of the game as quickly as he can because he has such an advantage.
Yeah, and after looking at cupolar and copular, he decided to play coupler, which is a sacrifice of about 6 points there. And I wonder if that was just maybe not being 100% sure that they were valid, because it seems as though it would have been worth it to take the 6 points. But he also might be thinking a little bit about other aspects of letters that he could use and the advantage of E over A and that kind of thing. So now it's back to Thomas. Had he had these tiles the previous turn where before Coop was on the board, he would have had a big score with Ixtle, Ixtle, Warming, Chi, and Zax. But he still has a big score. What is it that he can do, Rob, that's going to give him get him to close this gap?
Yeah, he's looking at potentially using his D. It looks like he's deliberating on a choice between 2 plays. He can cash in that D hook that he set himself up with for the maximum amount of points with Dixie, Dixi. But he's also having right now, looks like he's considering just playing the Xi, not scoring quite as many points, but still being a bit closer to one of those bingos that he needs to get down on this board to come back. I think the point differential is, well, I guess I might be speaking too quickly. I think ultimately what Thomas's thought process is here is, I have the D, it didn't get blocked. I can score with the X and maybe still use the D myself.
Yeah, unfortunately, Wellington with his 6 tile draw is pulled a high probability bingo rack. It is an ideal rack, not an unideal one, and he plays Aliunde with haste. So that has definitely made this margin even more, although Thomas now has done well himself to put himself in a position of bingo.
Yeah, sometimes, especially when you're already down by a bunch of points and you see a high probability rack coming off a really strong player's rack, you're wondering to yourself, you don't need these words. Why can't you do something more exciting? But they're high probability for a reason. They come up and, everyone's going to play the tiles that if they get them. Like you said, Thomas does have a couple of strong responses here, but he really, really needs Wellington's draws to start falling apart quickly if he's going to be able to come back.
Yeah. Now, Thomas's highest scoring bingo, and he has 2 to choose from, 74 points, and it will form IS off of the I in XI. So the one thing that he doesn't know at this point is that Wellington has drawn an H, which means that there's a good chance that after silage comes down, Wellington will have another big score and be able to get out of his trouble that he's in right now. So this is looking pretty grim for Thomas, who, although he's going to bingo and make the margin a little bit smaller now for him to be able to kind of stay within range, Wellington is going to have an answer.
Yeah, this is one of those scenarios where you really need a lot of good luck to come back from in a game like this where you're already down 169 points. But those types of really volatile openings, putting IS next to the triple word score, that's exactly the type of play that you want to have if you are still looking to win the game instead of try to minimize how bad the spread differential gets. Um, it's a really high risk, high reward kind of approach because, as you said, with Wellington having drawn the H, that's about the worst case scenario from Thomas's perspective. But in that alternate universe where he draws the H or an M, maybe even getting a bingo down, that could suddenly get him to within shouting distance, within less than 100 points.
Yeah, now Thomas is going to play the other bingo option that he has, which is Adelgids. So that doesn't create a dangerous H spot. In this case, he might be able to be a little bit better off, even though this particular bingo is 11 points fewer than Silage would have been. So good find there for Thomas to see Adelgids, because it's not the easiest word to see. And in this case, it'll at least prevent Wellington from scoring more. It seemed as though the kind of flow of this game was that Wellington always seemed to have the right thing at the right time. Like after Frig, he immediately drew it into bingo. He got the W hook on it. Then he had a big Z play for a huge score. He had a big K play for where there was a spot. So having the right stuff at the right time has been the story so far for Wellington, who is now quickly laying down Hoove in the open spot. So this is actually great for him, given that it allows for him to score some big points, but also clean up his rack.
Yeah, and it doesn't really leave very viable lines for Thomas here. That V prevents Thomas from playing a bingo down to the bottom right corner. He would need to basically have A, E, I, O vowel in front of an N here, or have a really lucky draw of an vowel N, S kind of play to be able to take advantage of what's now open on that column O. But I think with Thomas's play of Adelgids, I think that was recognition of just the risk of getting hit hard on the IS opening was too great with 5 O's unseen to him. We were kind of fixating on and talking about the H as a high scoring hurt, like painful play in response from Wellington, but that ISO would have allowed him to score quite a bit even without the H.
Yeah, given that he has an N, which can be used in ion or exon, I wonder if holding it has any value, given that it's the last N. He's now looking for plays. None of his plays are really all-star plays. The best he can score is 33 points.
Yeah, it's a little bit, again, I think there may also be that aspect, like I was talking about before, of like this game is so lopsided so far. It's a reasonably low probability that anything's going to work out enough to where Thomas is going to have appreciable chances to win. So I would be a little bit surprised if he came up with anything especially volatile right now. He might just be looking to play the game straight up. There's still some good tiles unseen to him, so there could be some kind of really, really painful play to come from Wellington. See the chat here is calling out the possibility of an additional hook Hoover on the play that was just made. We see here Thomas is selecting Vodun, leaving EEG. That looks like a pretty reasonable play. He had other options there to potentially play maybe Vendu there as well. But this, despite having the G on his rack, again, this might be one of those situations where you just kind of step back, stop really racking your brain, save some energy for your next round because everything is just tilted against you right now. You see that Wellington here has drawn the blank second blank here, so he's got some pretty nice options here. He has one particularly high-scoring play, which does take advantage of the hook that has been called out in chat, that Hoover play. We'll just have to see how Wellington kind of generates his options going through the alphabet with that blank. I haven't seen anyone calling out the biggest score in the chat so far, so I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, well, we'll see if that the knowledge of the hook onto Hoove evokes any ideas from our audience. The one thing is that Wellington, through most of this game, has had, the satisfaction of having good stuff at the right time, and the sort of the right match for what was on the board, and where he would have otherwise maybe struggled, it just seemed to be the case that it was good for the board. And often, as this case is a good problem to have, is if you have some heavy consonants, because with heavy consonants as opposed to having too many vowels, you can still score points, and that's kind of what had happened in the early goings of this game before it's opened up with a few bingos. So I think this is something that has been to the advantage of Wellington, and why he's already beyond 400 points and looking to add to that. So he's definitely on pace for a 500 plus game, and so it's one of those things where I think Thomas has played well. Very small decisions have kind of mapped out this game, but you just kind of have to take it on the chin that your opponent is having a good scoring game, and you're not really going to be able to slow down a player like Wellington when he's on his track for a 500 plus game.
Yeah, I guess that kind of rough rule of thumb about somewhere around 25% of games against an equally skilled player are just generally going to be unwinnable. Sometimes those happen, and sometimes they're on stream. You can see that Wellington here has found and is contemplating relatively self-descriptive play here. Once we'll get some confirmation on the blank cam once it pops up. But
good find.
There's Wellington throwing the curveball at the commentators here. He had never actually indicated that he had seen his highest scoring bingo here, Evocator, on his rack. He set up his tiles to play outscore, which was what I was trying to be a little bit cheeky about. But then Wellington just comes back with, his best play. He's such a world-class player, and it's just so enjoyable to watch him manipulate the boards in his favor.
Although it didn't play, that chat can also reflect on what's the anagram of evocator. Not that you would need it in the heat, which we've been facing in Iowa and most of North America at this time. He gets an extra 5 points for it. Why not? This game is well at hand. If you had any doubts about evocator, may as well check to make sure that no phonies get past you. So Thomas is trying to imagine a better rack. Not that he can play imagine, but he's some of those letters right now.
Yeah, it looks like the chat is correcting me that Wellington had demonstrated he had seen the play and was just looking for other options as well. I looked away at the wrong moment to look between a couple of different windows here, and just making a fool of myself as the commentator here.
I do wonder if there's a worthwhileness with the unseen pool for Thomas to, even though he not change the outcome of the game, to play off a couple of vowels and try to go for one more bingo, because there are lanes where that might become possible, in particular the end lane in the bottom. What do you think? Is it is it worthwhile to take a couple of a small score for playing vowels off, or how would you approach this kind of turn?
Well, when you look at the pool unseen to Thomas right now, he's got 5 vowels on his rack, and there's only 2 unseen. So there's a big consonant vowel disparity from his perspective. And even in a game like this, where it's just so one-sided, you still want to make your best plays. And we're looking at a situation here where Thomas could potentially look to get rid of a couple of those excess vowels and see maybe he can draw something through the N. And from his perspective, maybe Wellington just doesn't have tiles available to block it off. You can see Wellington's rack, as it turns out, doesn't have any vowels on it, which it's a bit of a weird situation in that Thomas is kind of hoping for Wellington to have that kind of rack so that the bingo line available might not get blocked. But if that's the type of rack that Wellington has, he's unlikely to draw what he wants for that bingo. He might draw vowels again, which is improbable, but Scrabble is about the improbable coming true.
Yeah, with Wellington's tiles. Oh, there you go. He's doing exactly that, dropping a couple of tiles, vowels down to keep his rack somewhat bingo prone, maybe hoping to draw one of those common letters like an R or an S or T, which are all sitting on Wellington's rack. So I don't believe this is going to work out for Thomas at this point in actuality. And he actually pulls 2 more vowels on, so sadly. And so Wellington doesn't actually have anything to worry about to block. And he's able to use his R and T to score well with Riot and Cooper. So that's pretty much the story of this game. I mean, he really just didn't have great tiles, Thomas, at any point to make things a real big threat. The best rack he had in the game was when, after playing Kat, he was able to play Cyanate. But from then on, it seemed to be tilted in Wellington's favor.
Yeah, you can see here Thomas is kind of just keying in on what might be one of the highest scoring plays available to him. He may have reached a bit of that point, which is so natural for players to fall into, of just, I only have a limited amount of energy to think about these games. I've still got another game to play today. I don't want to go through an exhaustive endgame right now. This hasn't been fun. I'm ready for my next game, and let's just move on. There's nobody quite like Nigel who can kind of compute an entirely perfect endgame every time in such limited amounts of time. But you can see here, Wellington is now playing through the O and Evocator, which Thomas's best endgame sequence would have blocked.
Right. And it's true that you can't really expend so much energy on a game that's already, a number of turns ago, been a write-off in terms of the outcome. However, in the one solace you can take is by drawing all these vowels at the end of the game, it's prevented Wellington from being able to score quite so much. And he's correcting a little tile inversion there, which is good. But like overall, like if Wellington had one vowel, he might have been hooking that onto Evocator and playing Straw or something like that, and that would have perhaps pushed Wellington into the territory of scoring close to 600 in this game. So really, just was one of those games where you're a bit of a spectator. Your opponent is constantly scoring, and their scoring never really slows down. And even if your tiles were a little better and your score had turned into a 400 plus game, wasn't really in question that Wellington was going to be able to own this game with the way that he had the right tiles at the right time.
Yeah, it's hard to know what to say when you've got these types of games. It's just when it's so evident that Thomas did not have kind of the firepower he needed, despite playing ultimately quite a good game. He played his tiles very well. they just didn't afford the opportunities that he needed to keep up with what Wellington was generating and coming up with.
Yeah, there's really not a turn where you can point to Thomas and say, hey, that was the wrong decision. I think, the only questionable one was, whether or not it would have been worthwhile for him to burn the blank and spend more time on that. But even that choice, ultimately, while it definitely shaped the rest of the game, he did end up bingoing the next turn. So I don't know. I think that one is a toss-up. But other than that, I mean, the game has been played well by both players, and it was just one where Wellington had the right stuff, and Wellington being in that very top of the top skill set, you kind of need him to not have good tiles in order to be able to beat him on any given Sunday.